Super Tuesday coverage continues from the Oklahoman's video studio. Good evening again. I'm Dave Morris. The AP has called the Super Tuesday race here in Oklahoma. Ted Cruz for the Republicans, Bernie Sanders for the Democrats. Almost 2/3 of the precincts reporting have been turned in. Thanks so much for joining us. Our live coverage continues throughout the night here on newsok.com. There you're looking at the Republican returns. We'll have the Democrat returns as well. We're live on the street corner at Sheridan and Robinson in downtown Oklahoma City. You can follow us online on your mobile device. Be sure to like us on Facebook. I'll give you a behind-the-scenes tour on the News OK Facebook account. Big thanks to Tiffany Gibson and Matt Carney for their helps, the ones and the zeros, if you will, on the digital side of things, and for the cast of thousands in the control room and here on the set. I'm joined again by Kelly Fry, editor of the Oklahoman, Phil O'Connor from the Oklahoman's newsroom. And on the phone, a couple of political science experts, Richard Johnson from OCU and Michael Crespin from OU. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Phil, I'll let you lead us into this conversation.
Well, guys, we'll ask the same question you have as we're asking everybody else, which is how shocked are you by what you're seeing in these returns tonight?
More shocked on the Democratic side than the Republican, honestly. Of course, I never get out of Oklahoma City, so maybe I'm a little too insular, but I was a little surprised that Bernie did as well as he was doing. Not so much a surprise on the Republican side.
So I'd have to say I was surprised by Ted Cruz winning. You know, he was behind by 10 or 12 in the polls. The Sanders campaign, I think he worked really hard in the state. I was actually canvassed by a Sanders supporter, and I live out here in the sticks in Norman, so I was surprised to see somebody.
You're both around college-age students a lot of the time, so from what you're exposed to during the day, did this surprise you, or are there a lot of Bernie supporters?
Oh, a ton of Bernie supporters. I mean, I don't know of anybody at my place who was a Democrat who wasn't a Bernie person if they were under 25. So there's a great deal of passion, and so I appreciate about his candidacy, that he has this aspirational message that is getting young people at least involved in discussing things.
Let me ask you, if Bernie Sanders doesn't end up being the eventual nominee from the Democratic Party, do you think Hillary Clinton could rely on that kind of support? Do you think they would turn out for somebody like Hillary Clinton? Do you think those voters would transfer?
I think that you have to look at who the Republican nominee is. If it's Trump, I mean, they have such heavy negatives. You have a real dilemma then about Republicans who feel they can't vote for Trump, and some Democrats who feel like they can perhaps support the Democratic nominee. So you do really have a really interesting sort of dilemma.
Michael, how about
So
you?
I would say it's tough to turn out some of the college students. You know, Sanders did a great job. You know, hopefully they'll turn out in the general. On the flip side, though, Clinton does a really good job turning out African American voters that Sanders has trouble with. So you know, they sort of have different demographics they do well with.
Going forward on the Republican side, you know, it's obviously a great showing for Ted Cruz here in Oklahoma, and I think that is surprising to a lot of people, given the polling that showed Donald Trump being, you know, easily in the lead for quite some time here. I don't know if the polls were just that wrong, or you know, what does this mean for Cruz going forward?
So I think Cruz stays in the race, right? Winning Oklahoma is big. You know, the expectation was he'd win Texas. If he won only Texas, doesn't look so great. But picking up another state, you know, now his 2 wins today. He'll stay in the race, keep going forward.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. I think that Cruz is always hard. I think that Cruz is easy to underestimate in a lot of places and maybe harder to poll based on his support in the evangelical community and the strength of his organization. I mean, that hasn't turned out everywhere, but I think that's what's happened in Oklahoma.
And Professor Johnson, what about Rubio going forward? Does this pretty much spell an end to his campaign, do you think, or does he go to Florida still?
Well, I think he holds on to Florida. You know, the thing that scares some Republicans more than Trump is Cruz. I mean, let's just be honest about that. You know, somebody was quoting Lindsey Graham, do you want to die by poison or by a gunshot? And that's how some establishment Republicans feel.
Mike?
Yeah, Cruz has no friends in the Senate. Most of my research looks at the Senate, and he calls McConnell a liar on the floor. That's a big no-no to do on the floor. So yeah, there's a lot of the establishment don't like him.
We are talking with Richard Johnson and Michael Crespin as our election coverage continues throughout the night. Previously, we had Adam Kemp over at the Republican Watch Party. Let's go back to him as Governor Mary Fallin is addressing the crowd.
I always often forget to introduce myself. But the reason we wanted to have this victory party tonight for the Republican candidates is because this year we've shown so much momentum and so much interest. And we have our candidates' campaigns for the first time, and I've been doing this over 20 years, that actually the presidential candidates had offices in Oklahoma. They had boots on the ground in Oklahoma. So when the governor talked to you about the historic voter turnout, it's because the people put the time and the effort into the state of Oklahoma. So go back to your campaigns and thank your campaigns for putting the resources, the time, the energy, the money into it. But more importantly, I want to thank each one of you for turning out here, not just tonight, but turning out to the polls. And one thing I do want to say that in looking about this victory party tonight, we did have it in mind to have this as a unity party. That's what tonight is. Tonight is a unity party for us all. Whoever might win, we have to remember, we love sports in Oklahoma. And I want everyone to think about tonight that each one of these campaigns are competitors.
All right, so this is Pam Pollard speaking at the Republican Watch Party. I think we missed the governor there, but we will have that footage online at newsok.com later on. Phil, let's bring you back in along with Richard Johnson and Michael Crespin. Some jubilation there at the Republican Watch Party regardless.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the governor does now because she's yet to endorse anybody in this race. So it'd be interesting to see if tonight changes anything on that front. Guys, going forward into the fall, what are your thoughts? Who do you think the candidates will be in November, and what do you think the outcome will be?
Boy,
so I think
go ahead.
Clinton's looking good on the Democratic side. I wouldn't bet against Trump, from the Republican side, although I guess you don't really know. And then, Clinton versus Trump, I would pick Clinton.
I would just say my thoughts are pretty much in line with my colleagues. The path forward for any Republican besides Trump is getting narrower and narrower, and I think people just waited too late to get behind a candidate. Scott Walker turns out to be prescient in this case, and I just think that in the end, Clinton has the advantages, and if she can get the turnout going, the only thing I would say is that enthusiasm gap right now is a problem for the Democrats.
Might depend too. If she's running against Trump, a lot of those Republicans are just going to stay home.
Yeah. With that pairing, it's the most hard to really sort of get your arms around anything. It's so unconventional.
Well, I think you heard a lot.
My elections course much harder in the fall.
I think you heard a lot of the Republican Party officials today. Even Ben Sass from Nebraska, I think, got up and said that, if it is Trump, he is leaving the Republican Party. If you have a sitting member of Congress saying that if that's the nominee, I'm quitting the party, that can't be a good spot for the party to be in.
No.
And so it raises questions about whether the machinery of the party will be there to help him on the ground. I mean, if you don't have the local politicians operating their machinery to get the vote out, it'd be a tough road for Donald Trump.
Is there anyone that's like a dark horse that the Republicans could push forward on an independent ticket?
Well, you start to run into a problem where you're talking about ballot access.
But I've heard, Doctor, that they could actually use a party that already is on the ballot in 50 states, like the Green Party.
Right.
That you could actually.
The irony of a Republican running as a Green Party candidate is not lost on me.
Well, irony has not been in shortage in this election season. So.
You're right. You're exactly right.
Exactly.
A difficulty though, if you have a Republican running as an independent, where is that independent going to beat Clinton, right? So it can beat Trump in some of the red states,
right.
But be hard pressed to win some of the purple states.
Well, I mean, Democrats have the demographic advantage in presidential elections anyhow, but yeah, a third-party candidacy would just, I guess it's 1912 all over again.
The bull moose.
Looking for something different.
Right.
Good talk, good discussion. We have been joined by Richard Johnson and Michael Crespin. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for the analysis. We certainly appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back at the top of the hour, Pat McFerrin, Bill Shepard rejoin us, the pollsters, to take a look at these numbers that we're seeing. Stay with us on newsok.com as our live coverage continues.